What is going on, everybody? I am back today because recently I reviewed a film that just came out on Shudder from directors Justin Powell and David Charbonier, and the film was called Push. And I talked about that movie a little bit. I really enjoyed it, despite the fact that it had a lot of tropes that those cat and mouse sort of home invasion thrillers have. I still found there to be something really special in the filmmaking and the approach and the performances from the actors. And this is another movie that these directors have done through Shudder that I feel like is probably their most praised movie. This is the film that I saw had the most positive criticism towards it. And I was just curious what other types of movies that they've made together and like what that feel is like, because whenever I discover indie horror directors and I appreciate something that they've made, I always really want to check out other work that they've done. And today I'm going to tell you about one of their other films, The Boy Behind the Door. The Boy Behind the Door is directed by David Charbonnier and Justin Powell. Bobby tries to save himself and his best friend when they are kidnapped on their way home from school. So, I was really excited to watch this movie. Like I said, I really enjoyed these directors' last film that I watched, Push, the one that was recently released. And so I was curious to go back in their filmography and check something else out that they've made. And I enjoyed this even more than Push. It's definitely not a perfect movie, but I really respect the director's approach here to this style. This is very much like, kidnapping movie. We're familiar with these, especially when they're done through the perspective of the child in the kidnapping. I mean, there's been movies made about this. But what I really appreciated about this movie in particular is it's all through the lens of the kids, and it's also just kind of jumping you right into it. There's not a lot of exposition. It's really just the raw, intense, emotional experience of like if you were put into this horrific situation. And I think the directors do a really nice job, and they incorporate things, politically and societally through context clues, not necessarily through just like overblown expositional dialogue, which is something that I complain about a lot in filmmaking, is when you have a ton of unnecessary expositional dialogue. But I found this movie to be incredibly entertaining, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it today. So at the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to friends Bobby and Kevin. They are walking home on the way from school. They're just kind of joking around. I think they like throw a baseball together. The baseball gets thrown into the middle of the woods, and Kevin disappears. Bobby starts to freak out. He doesn't know where he went, and he starts looking around for him, and he ends up getting hit in the back of the head and thrown into the trunk of a car. Well, he wakes up in the trunk of the car, and his friend is nowhere to be found, and he somehow manages to break out of the trunk of this car, and he gets into this house, and he realizes he doesn't know who it is. He hasn't seen his captor, doesn't know what they're capable of, but the person has taken his friend Kevin and locked him up in this room to do what? He has no idea. And the entirety of the film is Bobby trying to save his friend Kevin from this captor and whatever they are attempting to do with these two young boys. So, like I said, I really enjoyed this movie a lot, and there are a number of reasons for that. For starters, the two lead performances from these child actors are fantastic. I've talked about this before in a ton of reviews that I have done. I have a really hard time with child actors a lot of times, and it's not necessarily their fault because they don't always have formal training. It's hard to bring a kid into an environment where you point cameras at them and say, hey, act naturally. A lot of times it comes across as incredibly scripted, and it comes across as inauthentic. These kids feel like real kids. Their friendship is incredibly palpable. The way they naturally build chemistry between these two characters, I think, is just really fantastic. You can kind of feel the history between the two of them, and how one person is literally being held in captivity and the other is trying their best to save their friend's life. And I thought that it was just really well structured. You didn't get a lot of exposition as to how their friendship formed or any of those things, but you didn't necessarily need it to understand the bond that these two people have. And I thought that they did a really fantastic job with that. Also, all of the adults that come into play, whether that's police that show up, the captors, which I don't want to get too much into because I found it to be really interesting. They all did a really nice job as well, especially the lead captor who is revealed. Their performance, I feel like, was very good, especially like the way they tried to manipulate people, the way the direction of the film kind of goes with their character. It creates a very suspenseful and palpable dynamic, which I think these movies, the best thing you can do with this is try to elicit a very intense emotional response from your viewer. And that's exactly what this does. You see these two kids who are just trying to live their lives, who are kidnapped, and there's some pretty awful insinuations there about the person essentially, selling them off for to to be assaulted, and all of these other things that are sort of implied through the visuals and small conversations that just kind of allude to this very immense, dangerous threat that I think, because the relationship is built up really well between these two characters, through just like the opening intro sequence, it made it really easy to kind of settle yourself in and invest yourself into. I also thought, similar to what I said about Push, it's very well shot and there's a lot of attention to detail and where characters are positioned in the frame. And kind of like, even though you're not seeing who the captors are early on, giving the audience a very defined sense of space is something that I think is really important, especially when an entire movie is essentially going to play out in one area. I really enjoyed that about this a lot. I think that they do a really nice job capturing, especially like the environment of the kid who's kidnapped, and then versus the other kid who's in this house they've never been in before, trying to navigate their way around so they're not caught, and also trying to make sure that their friend isn't in danger. And I thought all of that was executed in a way that really kept my heart rate up and really kept me on the edge of my seat through the entire runtime, which is, I think, is exactly what this type of movie is trying to set out and examine, is just like a very intense emotional thriller while also having some poignant commentary shots at like the current political landscape. This was made in 2020, and there's some shots at Trump in this movie and right-wing conservatism, but I think it's done really well through like subtle things like the incorporation of like a radio show, certain things that you hear in the background, dialogue. It's not just blatant exposition, which I think is what made it work so well with the movie overall. And I think the biggest strength of this movie is probably also the only weakness, I will say. I kind of wanted a little bit more storytelling, which is not normally something that I would complain about, but I feel like because a lot of the movie is repetition and a character being in peril, I was just kind of looking for something else to grab a hold onto. And I don't necessarily think it's a huge detriment to the film. I think like it's excusable because this is the directors are clearly trying to elicit a very extreme reaction out of you as a viewer. But like a little bit more character building or a little bit more build up or some more moments of dialogue, I think would have made me connect to the film a little bit more. I feel like the pacing at about the midway point, it starts to slog a little bit, and it made me a little less invested by the third act, but I still think that it's very effective. I think these directors are incredibly talented, and I think they have one or possibly two more films in their catalog, and I really want to check them out because I really enjoyed this quite a bit, even more than Push, and I thought Push was very well done. And I think if you're looking for something to watch on Shudder, you would definitely appreciate this, especially if you're into intense thrillers. Like it's sort of a cat and mouse thing similar to Push, except through this kidnapping narrative, and I thought that it was very, very well executed. So have you seen The Boy Behind the Door? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was very well done. I really enjoyed it. Kept me on the edge of my seat. I thought the performances were great, and I definitely think it's worth your time watching. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.